Hello. I think that everybody can hear me, so I'm going to go ahead. Hello and welcome to low-cost, DIY, and community-based approaches to audiovisual digitization. This is the second of 2 webinars in the Strategies for Audiovisual Digitization Project series, which was created by the Council on Library and Information Resources and is graciously hosted by the Digital Library Federation. I'm your moderator for today. My name is Brooks Basti, and I'm the Digitization and Special Projects Lead at Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh. Well, let me introduce our 4 presenters. Lauren Algee is Digital Curation Librarian for DC Public Library Special Collections, where she manages creation, preservation, and access for digital local history collections. She proposed and supervised the National Digital Stewardship Residency Project that created the DCPL Memory Lab and works on the DC Punk Archive team. Lauren holds an MIS from the University of Texas at Austin. Rachel Mattson is an archivist and historian from Brooklyn. She works as the manager of digital projects in the archives of La Mama Experimental Theater Club. She is also a core member of the Transfer Collective and the lead organizer of the Digital Library Federation's New Interest Group on Government Records Transparency and Accountability. She holds a PhD in U.S. History from NYU and an MLIS from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Dorothea Salo is a faculty associate in the Information School at the University of Wisconsin at Madison, where she teaches digital curation, metadata, database design, and linked data. She holds an MA in Library and Information Studies and another in Spanish from UW-Madison. Okay, is audio, is that working? Is everybody hearing me? Great. Pamela Vadakan has managed the California Audiovisual Preservation Project since its inception in 2010. She also teaches audiovisual preservation workshops and assesses archival collections for a variety of institutions across California for the California Preservation Program. She has a master's in moving image archiving and preservation from New York University. We all know why we want to digitize our cultural heritage materials. Our motivator may be long-term preservation or a focus on access. But what we may not know or have are the specialized training and associated resources needed for success. This webinar is a step towards removing the cost and capacity barriers you may encounter at work. Experts in the field are here to share their knowledge of low-cost and DIY solutions to assist in planning your digitization and community service efforts. The webinar will begin with a series of lightning talks in which the speakers will describe their work. Following that, we'll have a moderated discussion directed partly by community input, and we'd like to thank everyone who filled out the online survey that was attached to the announcement. Finally, we'll have a question and answer session. Feel free to type your questions into the chat box at any point during the presentation. We'll copy them into a separate box for the presenters to answer during the Q&A time. Now let's get started. I'll pass things over first to Lauren.
Hi everyone. I'm going to get started real quick so that we can power through these lightning talks. So as mentioned, I'm the Digital Curation Librarian at DC Public Library. Trying to make sure I know how to navigate on these slides. I've lost my navigation arrows. Am I very quiet? Okay. Let's see if I can somehow do that. Sorry, everybody. Okay. Sorry guys, I'm not sure how to navigate my slides, so if somebody in control can navigate them for me, that would be great. So I was the first person with digital in my title in special collections. So once I started at the library about 3.5 years ago, I immediately started hearing about public demand for access to digitization services. So we wanted to meet that need, but we also wanted to do more than just provide scanners for the public. We decided that what would work best would be a partnership between special collections and our DCPL labs, which is sort of our makerspaces who already do a lot of digital literacy and other digital education for the public. So we applied for and got a National Digital Stewardship resident, Jamie Mears, who did an incredible job for us for just under a year. You can look at her blog, the link there, which has really detailed information about the project. She started doing research and couldn't find any other digital libraries that are providing not just digital equipment, but also digital preservation for the public. So we made that our goal. So what she did over that year was literature review, equipment selection, workflow and equipment testing, public outreach, classes being developed, and launched the lab as well as evaluated it. So it resulted with the lab itself as well as a lot of resources and classes. So we'll take a look at the lab first. Next slide shows you all the different formats that we transfer. So you can see we're very AV heavy. The lab opened at our central branch in February of 2016. It just recently moved to our Northeast branch library in April due to a renovation of the central library. It's 2 stations that are booked through an online reservation system. Within a month of opening, it was booked 2 months in advance. You had to wait 2 months to get an appointment. There's 3-hour sessions for AV transfer and 1-hour sessions for scanning. There's also weekly 1-hour drop-ins where people can come and take a look at the equipment, get more comfortable with it, and ask librarians questions. That's really important because it's a DIY lab. People need to be able to just follow instructions and take themselves through very, very detailed workflows. It is just part of another computer lab at the library, so there isn't a lot of room and space for hand-holding. And it's just managed by branch staff at that library in coordination with the lab staff. The VHS and scanner are our most used technologies, and anecdotally our biggest users are retirees, creative folks, and stay-at-home parents. So how do we make this work? The most important things are resources. So we have a LibGuide, and do-it-yourself means we need to have really, really good instructions. So this includes all of our workflows, which again are very, very detailed. It also includes broader information to give people context for what they're doing about best practices, notes for the classes that we offer, resources for physical preservation as well as analog, because most people see the two as tied together and not separate things, links to free and open source tools and other resources that people can use, as well as how you could build your own lab at home. There was some difficulty in weighing archival best practice against public needs and wants in terms of file quality and encoding, but we came down on really trying to build preservation and digitization at every step. So that includes the file formats that we recommend, as well as building in metadata steps in our workflows, file naming, best practices. However, we can only do so much once they walk out the door, so that's where our programs and our classes come in. We offer 3 classes regularly that are repeated throughout our system. These include a Digital Preservation 101 class, Digital Estate Planning, and a class about social media in particular. So Jamie developed and tested these classes, the curriculums worked out the kinks, and then staff were trained to be able to offer these repeatedly. You know, we teach critical thinking rather than specific tools, which will change or disappear. It's more about how to evaluate software and social media and storage platforms to meet long-term needs than about specific recommendations, although people generally really, really want those as well. And we also offered other events as well to generally get the public thinking about interest in preservation. Home Movie Day, we go to DC Zine Fest. We made a zine that's downloadable from the wiki called MaxPres2 Electronic Boogaloo. We partnered with local institutions, including the National Museum for African American History and Culture, a VHS enthusiast group called Playback the Tape, and an organization called Dance Heritage Coalition, which had their own lab that they recently shut down and then gave us all of their equipment. So those partnerships have been really, really important. How do we keep the lab moving? It's all about staffing and sustainability. So then mentioned lab staff are the ones who manage the appointments and classes. They troubleshoot equipment. They teach the classes. There's also a working group that includes special collection staff, lab staff, and now staff from the branch where the lab is located. Additionally, we offer as part of the DCPL Professional Development Program, a class suite in digital preservation to get staff knowledgeable about it, and then when they complete that, they have to take their knowledge back to their branch and do a program or offer a class in digital preservation. So that also brings the lab outside of its one central location and into every part of DCPL, which is 26 different branches. But we're continuing to grow, and we are planning to bring parts of the memory lab to at least one other DCPL branch by the end of the year, and also to make it part of a labs truck that is coming. So we're looking at projects like Culture and Transit and Transfer Collective that have done sort of mobile digitization labs. We're also going national. We always intended to be a national model, and we've applied for and gotten an IMLS National Leadership Grant. This will create 7 new memory labs in public libraries across the United States. There's an application period for that coming in the fall, so look for that. And even if you're not at a public library, we'll have to partner with local archival institutions to apply. So look for that and think about partnering with your local public institution. Our kickoff is July 1st, and we are just going to keep growing and expanding and improving the memory lab and seeing how it fits at other institutions and how we can make it work in other places besides DC. So that's what I've got. A lot in a little period of time.
Thank you, Lauren. Now on to Rachel.
Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, good. Great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Transfer Collective. The Transfer Collective is a community-oriented, autonomous, nonprofit organization that offers low-cost audiovisual digitization, preservation, and access services, primarily to artists and grassroots organizations. We also foster a horizontal mentoring model for emerging archivists, and we engage in a broad range of other educational and outreach partnerships. At the core of the Transfer Collective's mission is lowering the barriers to audiovisual media preservation, especially with regard to material that documents the lives and work of people from marginalized communities, and especially for materials that haven't been acquired by a collecting institution and may never be acquired by a collecting institution. And when it was first established in 2013, the Transfer Collective was focused exclusively on offering very low-cost, preservation-level video digitization services for artists and small organizations. So for a very small fee, partners could get 6 analog tapes transferred. All transfers were performed by collective members using the equipment that had been assembled and was maintained in the home of one of our members. And is that the rack that we have in that space has the capacity to transfer a diversity of formats, including, at the moment, pneumatic, VHS, high-8, data, and audio cassette, but we are always integrating new formats into our infrastructure. As part of that work, we have developed a set of preservation-oriented workflows for our transfers using a wide range of standard calibration equipment and a combination of open source and proprietary software platforms. We digitize to the 10-bit uncompressed video file format, and whenever possible, we upload these videos to the Internet Archive, which then transcodes the video files to lower resolution access files. Although this partner-based service model still comprises the core of our work, in the past few years, we've also begun to expand our mission to encompass a parallel focus on education and reproducibility. So for instance, we've built pop-up video digitization stations and performed transfers in local community spaces, as Lauren mentioned earlier, including at the Mixed Queer Experimental Film Festival and at the Baltimore Museum of Art in collaboration with the Mid-Atlantic Regional Moving Image Archives. We've also lent equipment to community organizations who wish to conduct in-house digitization projects. And we've also conducted workshops for groups such as the Asian American Oral History Collective and others who need help managing mission-critical born digital audio and video files. Finally, we've just recently entered into a partnership that's currently underway with the Metropolitan New York Library Council to design and build an AV transfer station for their new educational studio. So stay tuned for that to be finished and available to the public or to the membership of Metro. So that's about as detailed an overview of the Transfer Collective as I can give in this short presentation. But before concluding, I just want to highlight a few of the tools that we found useful in doing our community engaged work. The first one is really just a set of practices and principles that we've come to call horizontal mentorship. The work we do requires such a broad spectrum of specialized skills and contextual knowledge, and very few people, even skilled archivists, have developed all of these competencies. But each of us brings to the work a distinct body of knowledge, so we use a deliberate skill sharing and peer-to-peer mentoring model to share our knowledge with each other. Teaching each other to tinker, troubleshoot, and repair obsolete equipment is a big part of this horizontal mentorship model. When you're working with obsolete technologies like analog video equipment, so much of the knowledge about how to use and maintain that equipment is also obsolete. So we find it crucial to accumulate and share this knowledge with each other. We also rely on a wide range of documentation and digital tools. I've listed a few of the most handy ones on this slide here, and I recommend checking them out. For instance, there's the minimum viable station document, which is a collaboratively edited rundown of the basic components that might comprise a video transfer rack, and the Texas AV Assessment Guide is a classic detailed guide to different video formats, their risk factors, and how to identify conditions and whatnot. There's also VRecord, which is an open source video capture software, and I'm happy to answer questions about any of these resources or recommend additional tools either during the Q&A or after this webinar ends. We've also created a set of tools, which we make publicly available. These include workflows, blog posts, and informational zines. There's more resources available on our website. And please feel free to reach out to either to the collective as a whole or to me. You're most welcome to email me with any questions or requests for more info. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. We're moving on now to Dorothea.
All right, how's it going? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? All righty, good. So my name's Dorothea Salo, but you can call me the Mad Information Scientist. I'm from UW-Madison. It's natural. And I'm going to talk to you about my work hobby for the last 3 years, which is known as Recover Analog. My microphone muted itself for no apparent reason. Am I back? Okay, good. Then let me pop back a moment. So this course was always envisioned as a service learning course, people going out into the real world to solve real world problems, such as AV digitization and media archaeology, dealing with digital media. And we couldn't solve these problems because we didn't have the equipment. So, oh no, we're doomed. But what if? What if we did actually have the equipment? 80-20, we certainly can't tackle everything, so we tackled what we could. They said I was mad! But we built it. This is an old picture. It's actually much bigger than this now, and it has its own server rack. I'm very proud of this. And they came. I have projects coming in through the doors constantly these days, as I'm sure you can all imagine. We do a thriving trade in wedding videos. But we still had a problem. Our information school is not only in person, we also have a thriving online program, and I can't give a server rack to UPS to ship to the Middle East, and we do indeed have students who are that far away from us. We actually had 2 problems. The second problem was small collections in small organizations that don't necessarily want to turn over the crown jewels of their collection to a mad information scientist, and can you blame them? Oh no, 2 problems, we're doomed! Fear not, professionals, the mad information scientist has a plan. And that plan comes in 2 boxes. One box is named PROUD, and the other box is named PRAVDA. PROUD stands for Portable Recovery of Unique Data, and PRAVDA stands for Portably Reformat Audio and Video to Digital from Analog. That one came to me in the middle of the night, and I had to. The idea here is to pack as much of RADD as possible, which is certainly not all of it. I'm sure a lot of you have seen a U-matic deck. They're 35 to 40 pounds. I'm not shipping that anywhere. But to pack as much as possible of RADD into boxes that I can travel with, that I can hand over to UPS and have them ship, so that we can get more people and in more places doing and learning to do this work. PRAVDA are made possible by the Institute of Museum and Library Services, to whom, of course, I am infinitely grateful. And that's what I have to tell you in the short amount of time I have. I am happy to talk to you about what I did and how I did it and how I'm getting things repaired and all of the nuts and bolts. As with Rachel, I think getting that expertise out there is super, super important, and I want to further that in whatever way I can. That's what I got. Take it away, Brooke.
Great. Thank you so much, Dorothea. Now we're moving on to our last presenter, Pamela.
Thank you, Brooke. Can everyone hear me? All right. Okay, great. Hi, everyone out there. The California Audiovisual Preservation Project, or CAVPP for short, since we don't have time for long-winded project names, we assist libraries, archives, and historical societies across California to select, digitize, and preserve archival materials related to state history. All free services thanks to NEH, IMLS, and the California State Library. You need me to speak up a little bit? Let's see. Is this better? So for the past 7 years, we've focused on analog audiovisual recordings, but we've also acquired existing digital collections, all content types, and of course, all kinds of files. And starting this year, we're now digitizing everything, including audiovisual recordings, photographs, scrapbooks, ledgers, newspapers, and assorted ephemera. A result of this project is that we've built a unique research resource, the California Light and Sound Collection, and I just wanted to point everyone to our URL, californialightandsound.org, since we don't have time to explore exactly, everything that we've been doing, but we have almost 10,000 objects up from over 150 partner archives. Most of the materials selected are unique, unpublished, original primary sources, living, breathing history as it happened, which is better than a textbook. And all of our recordings are up at, so California Light and Sound points to archive.org, and that's where you can actually see our content, but we also share our metadata in Calisphere and DPLA. And you'll see that we have a wide range of content. We have interviews, oral histories, speeches, debates, movies, travelogues, and of course we're missing stories, so we're always looking for new content. So I just want to, if you don't pardon my plug, if anyone's listening from California, we'd love to meet you in your collection at one of our regional workshops this summer. That's the main way we get the word out and meet folks. So in 2010, California Preservation Program established the CAVPP to address 3 major issues. Analog audiovisual recordings are the most at risk, as we all know. Most repositories have limited technical ability to care for audiovisual recordings, and of course, handling the large digital files can be daunting as well. And of course, folks have very limited resources. The reality is that many of our partners have a lot going on, including maintaining reference services. So AV collection care is not necessarily a priority. So from start to finish, we really try to keep our standards minimal, with the hope that more people will participate and the process is, easy enough. It doesn't take a lot of their time and attention. So these are the essential steps that guide us and our partners through the digitization process. So very quickly today, in lightning time, I'm going to share with you the first few steps through the quality assurance process that work well for us, along with some basic tips that we've gathered through the process, just with the hope that you all can start your own digitization projects. So the first step is, inventory, like have a sense of what you have. And so we ask partners to do this kind of before they start nominating recordings, because the reality is that we can't save everything, and with limited funding available, you have to know what you have so that you can at least apply and build the needs. So what do you have? What will you have? Which is a larger question. Where is it? And then just consider value, consider physical condition, and threat of obsolescence. So we ask our partners to think about this as they justify why it should be preserved. And we take that information as well in the nomination process. So we ask people to start with an Excel spreadsheet. It could be the basis of a catalog. If nothing's cataloged, that's fine. And just keep it simple. So these are our minimal fields. Of course, unknown is a fine value to put in if you don't know at the time. You can always enhance description after digitization. So people can work directly in a spreadsheet, or they can work in our Islandora system. So either way, it works. And I wanted to give a shout out to AV Compass as a wonderful free tool that anyone can use, and it spits out a nice spreadsheet with all of your data after you've gone through the form. And of course, there's fun videos there that I would check out. So once we get through the nomination phase, the partners send us the recordings, and then we actually outsource everything. So we don't have the capability, we don't have the staff to transfer thousands of recordings in real time. So we batch transfer to different vendors. And the nice thing about it is that it saves us time, of course, but we rely on vendors to provide, to have good calibrated equipment. They know preservation standards. They understand like file naming conventions. It can take so much time to have to rename files. We just don't want to have to go through that. And of course, like I mentioned, they provide one-on-one, one-to-one batch transfer options depending on the kinds of materials that you have. And I do recommend outsourcing if you end up having like a problematic format. It's always nice to be able to send all kinds of different formats to one place so that they can, apply kind of appropriate standards and procedures across collection. And I do encourage you all to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions because you're building a relationship over time. It's not just going to be one job. There's always going to be more, depending on funding, of course. So the last step I wanted to cover very quickly is the quality assurance step, because we can't check everything 100% in real time, and we rely on the partners to help us with this step as well. So we check the technical specifications. We check the beginning, middle, and end, at least 10% of the running time. We check the PV core metadata that the vendor creates for us, which includes all the descriptive metadata the partner gives us, our project metadata, and then the technical metadata that the vendor provides about the transfer. We run the checksums. We confirm that the quality is adequate for patron use, it's legible, and it's true to the original. And we confirm that, of course, it corresponds to the descriptive metadata, and that's when the partners can step in, because a lot of times with AV, as many of you know, the content may be quite different from what may be on the label. So what we've learned through this process is that it does take practice to learn how to differentiate original kind of analog look and sound from digital look, sound, feel, and how to determine if artifacts could have been introduced during the transfer process in your best estimation. So in our workshops, we talk about this. We give some examples to kind of try to teach people what this looks like, what this means. Of course, we always advise second opinions, and if you have cheap labor like an intern or work study students, it's always great to have them step in and help, because real time is scarce. And then I also advise just using free tools to help automate the process. So these are just a few real quick, some tools that we use every day, and I encourage you all to check out. In particular, the AV Artifact Atlas is a wonderful resource put together by BAVAC, the Bay Area Video Coalition.
and it's now a wiki, so anyone can contribute examples of errors or anomalies that we might see in analog and digital video as well as audio. And I think they actually have some film transfers up there too. So it's a great way to kind of learn kind of the look, feel, and they also tell you like, oh, is this inherent or is it introduced? Could it be fixed? So it's just a great way to kind of train your eyes and ears to these issues. And that's it. Thank you.
Wow, these were fantastic presentations. Thank you so much. We are switching gears to our moderated discussion. During this section, we will be discussing some of the challenges faced when planning or implementing these types of strategies. The topics are based on community feedback collected via the survey that was linked in the announcement for this series. Again, feel free to type any questions into the chat box. We'll get to them during the Q&A section. We have about 15 or 20 minutes for the discussion, so we hope to get through all of the questions during that time. Our first question is, what open source tools and low-cost equipment would you recommend to ensure a high standard of digitization and quality control? So I don't know if somebody would like to start off, our presenters.
I mean, I'll start. This is Rachel. I think these presentations have been great because I think a lot of us are offering a lot of slides that were in these presentations include lists of tools, and many of them are actually open source. And I think, is it true that the slides and the text from our presentations will be available on the internet after this webinar is over?
Yes, that is true.
Great. So, I mean, I think I would just say, not to sort of avoid answering the question directly, but in some ways it depends on what part of the process you're interested in. So there's like the capture process. If you're digitizing some analog tape, you can use this great open source tool that was developed by the EMEA open source committee folks called vRecord, and it's specifically designed to capture analog signal to a digital file. It wasn't created for editing video. It was created specifically for an archival process and workflow. So that's an open source tool. You can brew it on your own computer and use it on the command line. It's not that hard. There's a lot of documentation about it. I think Pamela just mentioned MD5Deep, which is an open source checksum generating tool.
I was plugging the one that we have
Pamela?
in-house that we developed, but it's probably the same thing. I mean, just, yeah, we have it on GitHub, but it's a similar thing, yeah. Just generate and check.
Yeah,
checksum.
yeah. Yeah, so that's, it's true about vRecord. It doesn't work with every other component. You have to make sure all your components comport with vRecord. So yeah, that's a problem. But anyway, so Dorothea saying that in the chat, so I just wanted to read that out. But I would say, in general, the EMEA open source GitHub repository is full of tools and documentation and information that are mostly about open source based mechanisms and information that will help you, and tools that will help you do this work. Stop there.
I'll just add that. Oh,
Great.
this is Lauren. I just, on the topic of
that?
more of equipment rather than
Lauren.
Software, you know, we did go out and purchase this for our equipment, but I had mentioned that the Dance Heritage Coalition also donated a lot of equipment to us. There are a lot of people out there who are enthusiasts of these types of projects and who not only have equipment that they may be willing to give or donate to you, but also often have that equipment because they know a lot and can teach you a lot about that equipment. So that would be my one note about equipment. There's also a lot of great places out there that refurbish equipment and repair it that still exists. So we definitely utilized local vendors for that.
Great.
Well,
Well,
I just wanted to
Pamela, do you have something to say?
the AV Artifact Atlas again, just because it's a good way of learning like what to look for. Yeah, I just encourage everyone to check that out, because I think it does take a little bit of practice to kind of get a sense of like digital artifacts or what could go wrong. It's like when you see it, you know it kind of thing. But also it gives you the vocabulary to communicate what you're seeing, especially if you're working with a vendor. It's helpful just to know kind of how to translate what you're seeing in a technical way, and then just start that dialogue. And if it's not technical, it's fine. You can ask questions, but sometimes vendors tend to just, that's their perspective, and they just immediately get tech on you, and you're just like, wait a second, like let's just go back and look at the content and let the content speak for itself.
Great. Thank you. And I think we can move on to our second question, which is, what strategies and infrastructure do you use to provide digital storage and file management?
This is Pamela. I'm happy to jump in. So we keep all our Access files at the Internet Archive.
Yeah.
I do recommend them for storage. It's free, so I can't get any cheaper than that. And then we put our large preservation masters on LTO tape, which is pretty affordable. It's about $55 per tape, but then you need an LTO drive, which can be $3,000. So it's a bit of an investment, and the files are not readily accessible like on a hard drive. So that's something to consider if you do want access. You have to put the tape in, and it spins a little bit, so it takes time. So it's worked well for us, and we've had our LTO for about 7 years. We do integrity checks every year, and so far, so good, no errors. So yeah, it's worked well for us.
I can say for the Memory Lab, we do
Does anyone want to jump in?
People bring in their own storage or have created accounts that they can use for their own storage. We have a calculator when they sign up for appointments where they have to try to figure out how much space they'll be, taking up with their videos or their audio cassettes once they're transferred to digital. We do recommend the Internet Archive if people, want to be able to just put something up to the cloud or to another service that will, maintain that material or provide access to it. And we also use MetaZ in our workflows. That's the metadata embedding software that we recommend within our workflows that people use to manage their files, because we definitely believe that neglect and just misplacing files is as big of a risk to those materials as obsolescence or needing to migrate. So.
This is Rachel. Just to jump in, again, we use the Internet Archive at Transfer Collective, partly because we're not a collecting institution, and also partly because we work with small community-based organizations who generally don't have the wherewithal to install something like an LTO storage infrastructure. So, and we are interested not just in digitizing stuff and giving it back to the people who brought the material to us. We want to try to use this project to contribute to diversifying the historical record, and we want to have some gesture towards a preservation aware storage strategy. So the Internet Archive is a kind of low budget, accessible way to do all those things when we have really very little money, and our partners have also frequently very few resources, and also limited knowledge about how to care for digital files. So there are issues with using the Internet Archive. It's not a perfect solution, but we do also use it.
I just want to put in a quick word. regarding the work that IMLS and others are doing on what they're calling the National Digital Platform. The storage and preservation problem is a big piece of that work. They understand that there are huge gaps. So as you can, please support that work.
Great. Well, thank you all. So I think we can move on to our last question, and that is, how do you approach and engage your institution or community with your work?
I'll jump in on that. Serendipity helps. As dorky as the acronyms are, and I fully own my dorkiness, they work. They get attention. Radford's got attention in local media who are interested in it because it sounded cool. I've also taken it to the local Mini Maker Fair and gotten lots of people interested in it that way. So look around you for opportunities that may not seem obvious fits. It's surprising how interested people can be.
This is Rachel. I'll just jump in. So the Transfer Collective does a variety of different kinds of outreach stuff. We often we'd like to bring digitization pop-up stations to community spaces and other kinds of open, more public spaces. That's one way we do outreach. We also host screenings. We have an annual screening, or sometimes twice a year we do some screenings in a local public garden, like an open garden in Lower Manhattan. And we've also done screenings in universities and in other spaces of work that we have transferred. And we also do these workshops. And, mainly the way that we have a presence on the internet. We are trying to move our stuff to GitHub so that we're part of that community of conversations. But we also use a lot of social media. And it's sort of word of mouth, I think, at this point about how folks hear about us and within our community, our personal communities and our professional communities. We do a lot of talking about our work and trying to advocate for and share our knowledge.
I'll echo what Dorothea and Rachel said. A lot of it has to do with just getting out in the communities and making sure they know you exist. Most people, once they know you exist, are very excited and will want to transfer their own materials. Also say when it comes to more recent audiovisual materials or digital materials of any kind, that can be much harder to impress on people the importance of those materials and their fragility and the importance of caring for them. Often people see, their historic family materials as important, but not necessarily their own home movies. So trying to sell that to people to a certain extent is a lot of our outreach. We do a lot of, in general, in our special collections, neighborhood history events and series of events in specific parts of the city where we go out and talk in general about the bigger picture of that area's history, and then often build in preservation workshops as part of those programs so that people are thinking about, can make that sort of analogy between the history they were so excited about that, has been captured, about the people who lived there before them, and make that leap to their own materials and how important it is to preserve and care for those things to be part of the future history and archives of the city. So that's one strategy we've adopted.
This is Pamela. I was just going to say we
Great, Pamela?
work directly with organizations rather than the public, and we depend on our partners to take the initiative to do outreach and gather the content that we're interested in preserving and being part of the greater kind of collection. But we've definitely done some events that have brought in the community, like a local history fair. It happens every year in San Francisco. We always do a screening.
which is always really fun. And then we've gone down to the Archives Bazaar down in Los Angeles. So we've done some of those kinds of events, but generally we really want the partners to promote their own content. I mean, they're the ones that know their users, and they're there on the ground. We definitely would love to do more events where, we could, partner with them. For instance, like a scanning project where the community could come in and, contribute their photographs or their home movies, and we could do the digitization and take the files and preserve them, put them online, but then, of course, the originals would go back to the community. And we'd love to do more of those kinds of events. We have inherited files from events like that, like the Shades of California is a huge project, I think from the 90s, in the early 2000s, where local libraries set up scanning stations and scanned a bunch of photographs from people coming in, and we have those files, so it would be great to be more on the ground at the time of digitization, so we could kind of take preservation and access off, help partners with that step instead of them, because they're doing the big work of like on the ground bringing people in. And yeah, I can't underestimate the effort it takes to get the word out and get people excited about preservation. I think we all kind of struggle with that, making it feel real and tangible and important to a greater public.
Well, that's great. Does anyone have anything else to add? Okay, well, we are done with our moderated discussion, and now let's move on to the Q&A section. I currently don't see any questions at this time. Is there anything anybody wants to ask? Okay, we do have one from Ryan, and he says, regarding LTO storage, do you have a plan to extend storage beyond the inherent durability limit?
Are you talking about migration, Ryan? I assume that's what you're talking about. We do have a plan. Yeah, we are working, so we started with LTO 5, and we're now making LTO 6 tapes. So LTO 7 just came out, and we're kind of waiting for that to settle. And currently we have an LTO 6 drive. So we could still read LTO 7 tapes, and I think once we move on, we will need to, I think we're going to have to start planning the migration to 7, but we're kind of waiting for, we get our LTO, we don't build the LTO in-house, we get LTO from vendors, so we're kind of waiting for the vendors to step up and say, okay, we are now creating LTO 7 tapes. So we're kind of in this like waiting period right now, but we do anticipate that inevitability, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to learn from that process.
Great, thank you. So this may be illegal, but this is a question I have for you. One thing that I always am wondering is, how do you handle condition issues, especially when it's the community bringing in their materials?
I'll answer for the Transfer Collective. For us, we're such a low budget shop. We're all volunteer. We don't have actual space. We really just operate out of people's houses. And we really don't have the capacity to do any extensive cleaning or baking of tapes or, mold mitigation. So we tend actually, and this is not the answer you want, Brooke, but we tend actually to say, unless it's a very simple, like the tape just needs to be very lightly cleaned, or there's a little bit of dust or something, we can't always transfer tapes that have serious condition issues. what we are starting to work on is trying to create a guide for people who aren't institutions for how to pick a vendor, because I think there are so many vendors. I think people have a lot of questions about how do you know which vendor to trust. I think vendors are digitizing to DVDs a lot of times, and that's obviously not, that's compressed video, so that's not a good preservation level transfer. So we're trying to create some guidelines to help people select, go to other people when we have to turn them away, to go to other organizations or businesses to help them with their digitization services. So I'm sorry, Brooke, I don't have a good question for you, but a good answer for you, but I do think it's important to know what your limits are, and if you really have a limit and you can't handle, mold is very serious, and if you try to digitize a moldy tape, it may just ruin your equipment and do further damage to the tape. So you have to be very, I think, careful about taking on projects that you can't handle if you are a community-based project like we are.
I was just echoing Rachel that we do not.
Great. Well, thank you.
It looks like we have.
Sorry.
Same thing as we try.
Sorry, I was just going to move on to the questions that we have.
If they still need to get.
But I have a feeling Pamela has a different answer. Pamela might have an answer. Pamela, do you have a different strategy?
I know that there are particular vendors who are enthusiastic about mold, like Peter Brothers. He's the guy to go to, I think. It really depends on the situation. Part of our selection criteria, we want to know if something is in poor condition, because that means it's more urgent, especially if it's actively deteriorating or moldy. So, or if it needs repair. If it needs special treatment, we would like to accommodate it if we can. So it really depends. But if something comes in, we'll try to find the appropriate vendor who can handle it.
Great. I think we have time for one or two more questions. Jess asks, what about value-added service? Do you offer methods where transcription can be added to AV material for searchability or accessibility, or offer recommendations about how to add that kind of enhancement?
I'll just step in here. I think other people probably have really good things to say on this question too, but when we upload stuff to the Internet Archive, we try very hard to add metadata and as much descriptive metadata as we can based on the metadata that the partner has provided us. And we don't do transcriptions. We just do not have the capacity, but we do try to make sure that things are findable, at least minimally findable on the Internet Archive. Yeah.
Great, and I think some people are answering your question in the chat box. That some things that may be helpful to you too. Does anyone else have
some vendors
any suggestions for Jess?
Service. I'm not sure about the cost, but they usually outsource that kind of work. But I know it's possible. And then I would also second Lauren's recommendation of Pop-Up Archive. We've added some audio recordings there, and the transcription's pretty good at the free subscription level, and then you can pay a little bit more for better accuracy. And I think they're going to develop transcription service for video. I think it's in the works maybe, but they know about the need for sure.
Great. Well, I think that we are almost out of time. I just want to say thank you all for attending and participating in the webinar. This concludes the Strategies for Audiovisual Digitization Project series. I'd like to thank the presenters for sharing their expertise, and I'd also like to thank CLEAR for organizing this series and the Digital Library Federation for hosting. If you'd like to learn more about CLEAR or DLF, we have provided links below or to the left. Recordings of both this webinar in the series as well as the other will be freely available on DLF's Digitizing Special Formats Wiki. And on the left-hand side, you can also see that as a link. It will also be available on the event page that led you here. Transcripts and slides will also be available. So again, I want to say thank you so much for your participation, and good luck to everyone. Thank you.